everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I'm delighted to be talking with someone who has a wonderful, wonderful illusion on their t-shirt and is also a creator and artist, and that is Ken Meyer Jr. Ken, thank you
Yeah,
for joining.
it's going to be funny because when I remembered we talked about comics a little bit, I
Mhm.
said, "Oh God, I got to get my Love and Rockets T-shirt on," because I had a different shirt on, and I'm getting ready to go to an event, and I had it packed away for one of the
Yeah,
shirts I was going to wear. So I said, "Oh, I got to get this sucker out, get it on
thanks
its
for
way."
digging it out. That's wonderful. I love that. Love that connection. And I'm curious about you have this story I've read a little bit of, but I'm curious about your initial connection to comics and the arts and how these things became part of your life.
Um, well, I started reading comics as a real young kid, probably I don't know, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10, something like that. I think one of the first comics I remember, and my memory's terrible, but I remember, uh, let's see, it was a really early, it was a Sea Devils with Russ Heath doing a lot of the artwork. I
Hmm.
think that's right. Um, and then it went on to the usual Marvel, DC kind of stuff. And then, and actually, that's how I learned to start drawing because I would sit in my grandmother's kitchen when we were visiting. I remember sitting; she had like a big round bay window thing to the backyard, and I'd sit there using carbon paper to trace from these comics. And then I would put the comic next to the paper and try and draw what was there, and then I'd make up my own characters as the years went on. Um, and then I think it was 1971. I remember that because I got a letter from Alan Light, who did the Buyer's Guide for Comic
Hmm.
Fandom. My uh, librarian in my high school had given me one because he knew I was into comics. He said, "You might like this." So she gave me a copy of that, and I wrote to him, and I think I probably said, "I'm a big comics fan. I'm new to all this, et cetera, et cetera." And he was really nice. He sent me a couple of free fanzines. Um,
Hmm.
it was an issue of the Collector. It was an issue of one that he did himself. Now I can't remember what it was called, but and I think a couple other ones. So that really got me into fandom right away. Started sending away for stuff. I mean, I remember sending quarters taped to index cards, that long ago.
Yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah.
I mean, 50 cents was a big deal for me at that point. So, and then I got really into that, and I would do work of my own and get it published in some of these fanzines, which was the only way you could really see your published work back then and
Hmm.
get feedback and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I always am interested in the creative process, and I know that you mentioned that you have this link with music and movies and television, so I'm curious how that plays in as well.
Well, that mainly plays into some of the work that I actually do and did because,
Hmm.
especially when I lived in San Diego about 20 years ago, I would go to this music club called the Belly Up in Solana Beach, which was maybe about 20 miles away, 30 miles away. And they would have a lot of really good mid level acts. And I wanted to meet my favorite musicians. And of course, it would be really hard with someone like U2 or Springsteen or someone. I tried that with those guys, and someone would send my artwork backstage and get the print signed and send it back out to me,
Hmm.
which was nice. But obviously, I wanted to meet these people. And so this place was a good place to see sort of mid-level groups and try and meet them. So I did that with a whole bunch of people. I do a painting, get a print made, go to the show, try and get backstage, give them the artwork, and get them to sign a print for me. So
Hmm.
I was meaning to get some stuff out ahead of time, and I can grab it if you decide you want me to show a few. But I've got a bunch of prints that I used to have up on the wall. I used to have like this shrine around my big stereo with all these pictures of all these musicians, or prints of the artwork signed. But then I ran out of wall space. I think I moved to an apartment or something, and so now I have them all in a big bag in a closet. And
Nice, nice.
movies and stuff, that's just, like anyone, I was into all that stuff before I would do drawings and paintings of various things. And even back in the fanzine days, in fact, I grabbed it. There's one fanzine called AFTA. This is what he
Hmm.
would do. This has my cover on it, actually. Steve Martin. So he was huge at the time. It's like 78. And so it's got a bunch of illustrations. Here's one of Devo, who was still popular back then. So, you know, music and movies, I'd end up doing illustrations and stuff. But as far as the fanzines go, mostly it was comic characters.
Cool. Cool. Love the breadth of what you've worked on, and you have also created in the world of online games, tabletop games. Is that right?
Yeah, I had a couple jobs. I had a job from about was it 99? I think 99 to 2001. I remember that because uh, I remember driving into work one day and hearing this stuff on the radio. It didn't seem real. It was 9/11 happening. And I remember
Hmm.
going to work and the guy saying, no, go home, etc. But this was Sony Online, who made this game called EverQuest. I don't even know if it's still around, but it was sort of like World of Warcraft before there was World of Warcraft. And you go in and you pretend to you run around killing like little creatures to gain strength, and then you fight bigger things, go on quests and all that kind of stuff. And I did artwork, did various kinds of artwork for the game, but mostly was what are called textures, which are these Photoshop files that wrap around stuff to make it look like skin or leather or armor or tree bark, whatever.
Hmm.
And I did some other artwork for them too. Uh, and then I had a lot of different kinds of art jobs. Like a lot of people, I went through like advertising agencies and stuff like that, and I had worked in online companies that would, you'd like do artwork that would appear on a website for a bank or something. But one job, I had a couple of government contract jobs in a row. One of them was at Top Gun in San Diego when I lived there, and I would do artwork. Actually, I can grab something real quick right here. Um, I just did this recently, and this is kind of funny because when I was there working at Top Gun, we would do artwork that would appear in lessons in slide form, and cartoons and graphics that would show the displays in the plane for people to fly the plane. It was, um, I think that was like F-16s and some other planes. Um, and I'd also do these call signs for the pilots who would do the lessons. They wanted like a funny or interesting version, and I did these way back in like 95, 96, etc. But one of my buddies who I worked with contacted me only like a month ago and said these guys want to start doing some more, and he
Hmm.
hadn't been doing much work for a while, so they forwarded him to me. And so like this is an example of
Oh.
artwork of the pilot there and some
Hmm.
various things that relate to him. And then this would be, scanned and put into a lesson.
Wow.
Um, and so I had a couple jobs like that in a row. And then I think the first one I had was when I started in Tucson. And then it was, I think before San Diego, I moved to Vegas because I got one of these jobs where it was for the stealth fighter before it was declassified. So I had to get a secret clearance. And I would
Hmm.
get on a plane like a 737 Monday morning and fly to this remote spot in the desert, supposedly across from Area 51, they told us. And we work 4 10-hour days, live in these trailers, and then fly back home Thursday night. And so the same thing, I would do our artwork for slides, and I did the insignia that would appear on the side of the plane. Most planes would be on the tail, but in this
Hmm.
weird plane, it was on the side of the plane. So if you go to an air show and they have a stealth fighter, there's a chance it will be there. And the funny thing too is I based it off of an old Frank Frazetta drawing of
Oh
a
yeah.
Ghost Rider that was like a more Western theme looking character on this, devilish looking horse. So a lot of different kinds of artwork through the years.
Interesting. The places that art can take you, right?
Yeah, I've had all, and I started going freelance about 20 years ago, so it's been freelance since then. But before that, I had art jobs, related jobs, pretty much my whole life, doing one thing or another.
Yeah, yeah. Any particular stories or any particular types of work that inspire you the most?
Well, when I was growing up, as I said, I learned from comics, so there's an awful lot of comic artists that
Hmm.
got me going. I mean, the artists that most people would know, like Jack Kirby or Neil Adams, and then and that was like when I was mainly just doing all the superhero stuff, reading all that stuff. Um, so maybe John Buscema and Barry Smith, I really liked him a lot. And then little as it got um, into the 80s, maybe the early 90s, then I got more into what was becoming a lot of the independent craze that was going on. So like, Love and Rockets,
Hmm.
Nexus,
Hmm.
Nexus, Cerebus, and I took a lot of visual advice from those comics, studying those comics. And I got to meet Steve Rude once years after that and go to his house and look at all his sketchbooks, which it's just blow your mind
Yeah.
how many sketchbooks he has and how full of it is, how full of amazing stuff they are. Um, and so I was inspired by a lot of that stuff. And of course, also, I was reading a ton of heroic fiction like Conan, Edgar Rice Burroughs, um, the Gore books, all that stuff. So, obviously Frank Frazetta, Roy Krinkle, um, a lot of the cover artists in those books and some of the interiors were a huge factor in me learning as I went along. Um, I mean, I went to college, but I was a crappy student. I missed a lot of classes, slept too much. I wasn't really a party person. I was just lazy and I just didn't learn what I needed to learn. So I went back to school many years later, 2004. We were living in Savannah because my wife at that time had gotten a job at SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design.
Hmm.
And so I went back to school and learned some new things, and I was able to put names to stuff I was already doing, that sort of thing. So it was a really expensive but really good school to go to. Um, so I learned a lot from that too. So it's like mainly comics books, uh, probably the standard way of learning that a lot of artists who were into fantasy or comics at all.
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm a listener out there and I want to see your work, if I want to find out more, where would I go and what currently has your creative attention?
Um, well, I one of the biggest things that I was lucky enough to be involved in was this game called Magic the Gathering.
Hmm.
Let's see, first I started doing gaming work for mainly White Wolf Games. Did a ton, hundreds of paintings for them, and one of the artists there, I'm still not totally sure how I got it. It was either one of the artists there named Richard Thomas, who then went on to work for Magic, who forwarded some people to the art director at the time because it was a small company. Wizards of the Coast was a small company then. Or it was another art director by the name of Maria Carbato, who also went over there to did work for him. I'm not totally sure which one, but because of that one lucky break, I started doing a little work for them, and most of the work I did was back in the 90s, in the beginning of the game. And
Hmm.
nowadays, what I'm packed for actually is one of these Magic tournaments. They have them all over the world, and I've been able to go to several countries overseas, and I go to probably like an event a month, sometimes two, sometimes even three. Um, and do work for those events and sell work at those events. So that takes up a lot of my time doing those events, doing work for them, doing custom work for people that go to these events, whether it's at an event or through the mail, through email. So I do a lot of work relating to that. And I get the same art collection books that everyone else does, Spectrum and Infected by Art and some of these other books. And it's really always inspiring to look through those books. And sometimes you'll look through those books to get ideas, to sort of branch off from something that somebody else already did. It might give
Mm-hmm.
you ideas. So probably, I'm always looking at other artists' work in these books or online. But as far as where you can see mine, I have a website which is kenmeyerjr.com. It's
Mm-hmm.
KenMeyerJr.com. Um, and then I have a couple related sites that sell stuff. There's a site called Store Envy that I have a ton of work on that I'm selling there, and one called Fine Art America. And they have a sister site called pixels.com where you can get my work on everything from like shower curtains to purses to pillowcases, just all kinds of stuff. Um,
Nice, nice.
and the Story Envy site is a lot of magic related stuff, a lot of play mats, token cards, originals, all that kind of stuff. I also do on my website, I post, used to be on a different site, but they were having problems. So now I just post it on my site, and it's a fanzine review column called Ink
Mm-hmm.
Stains that I do once a month. So I'll profile one or a couple fanzines, and I'll have PDFs that I put together for the whole fanzine so people can see it all. Because these things are really rare and hard to find nowadays. When they were made, they might have done 100 copies, it might have done 20 copies, depending on the fanzine. So, and there's historical significance because a lot of professional artists now started in these fanzines. Dave Cockrum, for one, did a ton of fanzine work before he became a professional. So it's really
Mm-hmm.
fun to see all the early work of a lot of these people. So that's another thing that I do pretty um, regularly.
Cool, cool. I love the range. And as we've been talking, if you want to share a couple of images with me that you'd like me to highlight, I can put
Yeah,
those in the video so they can, if you want to send them to me, I can put them in digitally even so they
yeah, I
can
will
kind of
send
pop
you
up.
some, and then maybe if you want, I can do a quick walk around. I can show you a few things in my apartment here if you want. That are kind of interesting. Hopefully they'll be
Sure. I actually have to jump to a student Zoom here in just a minute, but
okay.
by all
I'll make
means,
it.
yeah.
I'll make it quick. All right. Oops, I forgot. Light doesn't work. Um, I did this recently, and I won't explain it because it's a really long, drawn out process. But there's a
Oh,
Hendrix
wow.
painting back there. It's kind of big. Um, and anyway, it was I had to work it up from a lot of mistakes and fix it. There is, and I'm sorry the light's not that great in here, but that's a fantasy painting that I did. And there's all kinds of stuff throughout the house. So I'll send you images. Um,
Yes, yeah.
Here's one thing I'll show you before I go because it's kind of goofy and funny. But it's one of my daughters um, as the Justice League.
Oh,
I mean, it's
nice. I
the
love
same
it.
daughter throughout the whole thing. I did it year like in the 90s, huge watercolor. All right, that's probably good enough. I don't want to cause your student to miss his meeting.
Sorry about that. I just
No,
got
that's
a
okay.
notification on it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I will put in images of the art and get it all put together. And I greatly appreciate your time and glad to share about your work.
All right. Thanks a lot for contacting me. And
Yeah, yeah.
anyone who wants to, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Blue Sky. You can find me on Instagram. I'm everywhere.
Awesome. 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 And glad to have you back here anytime.
Yeah, anytime you want. I can talk for hours.